Okay, I believe more people will join us, but I will slowly start today's presentation, and I appreciate everybody who is joining us, and appreciate everybody who will be watching us live and on YouTube later. My name is Oleg Kos. Me and Katerina Zayko are co-founders of Ukrainian chapter of Service Design Network. Oleg Balakin and Marina Yeremenko are also organizing this event, and Alex is our translator. Welcome. So again, thank you for joining us. The marathon is a global event. It is organized by Ukrainian chapter, but it is organized for the broader international community. And on this marathon, we share the practical experience and cases of the service design application for different areas. We already spoke about finance, we already spoke about healthcare, and today we will be talking about one more hot topic for service design. We will be talking about education. And I'm happy to present Anna Haverinen. She is a service designer and anthropologist and a teacher. She has many professors. She has many roles, and she will be sharing with us her great case on actually designing the education for the students and with the students. So it's also an interesting participatory case. Marina, I will ask you to switch on the slide so Anna can switch her. And Anna,
yes.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Oleg, for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. Greetings from Finland and greetings from Turku, which is a smaller city right on the coast, 200 kilometers from Helsinki. Used to be actually the capital of Finland, but nowadays it's the most historic and, in my opinion, the most beautiful city of Finland. But that's enough of Turku. About 10 years to move here, and I've lived here now for 4 years and still loving it. Absolutely. Yes, I will be presenting today few of my learnings and findings from a project that I did partly last year and partly this year as well. It took about 7 months in total. I will deeply appreciate any questions or any comments if you have, any critique even. I would love to hear anything that you have on your mind. And hopefully this will help you also in similar projects in the future as well. First, few words about me. My name is Anna. As Oleg already mentioned, I have many roles. I have anthropology training. I was actually trained, we call it the Indiana Jones package, because I studied archaeology, museology, and anthropology. And that doesn't basically qualify me to any other profession than working in a museum. I did that actually as well, and that kind of led me eventually to the path of service design 13 years ago. But that's enough of that. Currently, I have my own company called Havaina, and but this project that I will be introducing today was done with my previous employer, Grundlage, which is a brand design and marketing agency. We still work together. I'm an independent contractor at the moment. So this project was done with them. related to wherever in the world you are and in which culture you are coming from, if you have similar situations going on as well. So look forward to hearing that. But first, I will start with how I understand service design. This is a very simple and simplified way of narrowing down what's the purpose and what the goal of service design. I know that, and this is supposed to be a little bit like a challenge for you as well. But my role as a service designer has always been facilitating knowledge between users, stakeholders, existing services, technologies, services, business, strategy, whatever. But it's always facilitating knowledge and the flow of knowledge between different stakeholders. And this is where we dive into the actual project goal. The working title of the service was called Kumulatiivi. It's a word in Finnish, basically referring to a cumulative way of accumulating knowledge or accumulating skills or something like that. Difficult to translate, but that was the working title of it. And then the initial founders of the mothers of the idea was actually my previous professor, Outi, and her colleague, Sanna-Mari, which had a vision based on their personal work as educators, that Kumulatiivi could be a visual and playful modern digital learning environment that would provide a unique virtual world for students to access all the necessary student services. This is how they pitched the idea for me a couple of years ago. And I initially focused on the idea of creating a virtual world, because these people, they didn't have that much, they don't play games, and they don't use virtual worlds or anything like that themselves. I did part of my PhD in World of Warcraft and Second Life and all that, so I'm pretty familiar with augmented reality platforms and virtual realities, and I have also been involved creating those kind of services as well. So, but for them, the vision was about creating a visual, three-dimensional experience, if you will, as well. In addition to that, they wanted to build a service that would act as a platform for all educational institutions involved, and also bringing together all these disparate services, different kind of applications and websites and software that are already being used at the university level. So the vision and the original pitch, it was complex, to say the least. Here is a kind of mood board of what are we talking about when we are talking about a virtual environment. And they were really in the early phases, they were really persistent that this is the technological solution, how to create this service. And as we already know, as service designers, we always go back to the initial user need and the user problem that we want to solve, not to use which is a kind of an educational consortium. They have 2 vocational schools, mostly teaching music. And then they have 3 general upper secondary schools. So in total, we were talking about over 30,000 students just in Jyväskylä city. And there were also international aspects to this as well, since the applied sciences and university, they have a lot of international students as well. But this, we were trying to focus and narrow it down to understand what's the situation in with students in Jyväskylä specifically, and how do we scale from that. Just to give you a brief recap, what kind of ages are we talking about when we're talking about these 3 levels of education? So when we're talking about basic education in Finland, we entered the school at the age of 7, and we are finished by 15 or 16 or something like that. And then we go to either general upper secondary school or vocational education, or both. You can do it at the same time as well. So those are 15, 19-year-olds, and those were people in Gradia. And then you do your bachelor degrees or your master's degree and your doctoral degree. And these people are somewhere around 19 to ideas, but should it actually be, does it give you any kind of, does it solve any kind of actual problem big enough so that should be implemented? And also, and this was big request from the client, that what would be the probable costs and the product roadmap to build an MVP should this service to be actually built. The secondary tasks were, because the stakeholders, we were talking about big major educational institutions with loads of legacy, and they had some kind of collaboration and working together models. So this project was also a test, a kind of a pilot to test how this kind of project and development could work with between the stakeholders, and also map out future collaborations if there's kind of new findings that we could explore in the future. And then my personal favorite and dream come true, teach design anthropology and digital service design for students. And this was my initial dream goal. I think I started talking about this maybe 2016 or something like that, that I wish I could teach design anthropology to at any university at some point. And last year it came true. So how did we do it? This is the overall project overview. It took about, as mentioned, it lasted about 7 months, but in total we started to kind of, I was heavily involved in creating the project pitch and applying funding for this project as well, because my client, the university teachers and the professor, they didn't have any vocabulary. How should we do this project? Then after that, we have a kind of a vision of the solution that we wanted to create, what qualitative could be as a service, the minimum viable product. And then we continued to the phase 3, to the product co-creation, which we did with staff and students as well in mini workshops. And in that phase, I had my previous colleague from DICE, the Design and Technology Agency as well, since my colleague has been involved in, for example, something simple as making educational context for NASA students and something like that. So he's a very skilled guy in terms of creating educational content. So this is kind of like the overview. This is also a funding instrument to cut these different phases into 3 phases, because each phase had different funding. We before phase 2, 5 days before the phase 2 began, we didn't have any idea whether we are funded or not. So 4.5 days prior to phase 2, we received the funding email that yes, you can continue with the phase 2. So we had already done all the preparations, booked classes and made the material and everything like that. So it was a high risk. It was a really high risk, but it paid off eventually. But that's really particular with working in academic sector. Then let's talk about the strategy. In educational context, when we're talking about creating a service in this case academic industry, there are a load of strategic questions that we needed to tackle before actually diving into the service design project. I gathered a 25-30 people steering group for this entire 1, 2, 3 phases, and the steering group had what I'm missing the word. All the leaders of all the educational institutions, they were head of IT department, for example, head of educational management, and all this kind of, well, to say the least, very, very busy people. And maybe 1 or 2 of them were excited about this project. So the rest of the people were basically just like, okay, you're in this position and there's a project funded by this instrument, so we need to have people from this position working in the steering group for it to happen. So it was really a kind of like a political kind of a situation as well. And my job was remotely trying to inspire and ignite and engage all the people from the steering group to work together. It worked pretty well. We had 2 kind of these workshops together where I introduced the entire project and why are we using service design methods. And some of them people were already familiar with the methods, but the main questions that we needed to tackle together is how are we trying to solve questions that involve all the institutions involved in this project. And we had actually a few findings. I needed to do a lot of desk study for this as well. I needed to go through all the, for example, all the strategy material for all the educational institutes. I need to read all of that, and also go through some the Ministry of Education's material, what's coming in the future, for example, by 2030 or something like that. So it was a kind of like trying to make a massive mind map of different kind of strategic opportunities, and trying to find pinpoint opportunities. So, okay, these two are related to each other, and these are actually related to the original vision for qualitative, and kind of communicating those findings to the steering group as well, so they could see the big picture and kind of engage with this project in a more deeper level than just like, okay, this is a waste of time. So we had three main findings, and one of them was career coaching and career planning were either non-existent in all of the levels of education, or there were some opportunities and some minor kind of individuals. There were a few people who were doing an amazing job, but those kind of skills and those kind of practices weren't leveled in all of the institutions. So it was basically based on luck whether the student got any good career coaching or career planning services. There's a lot of free material out there, but when we are talking about the student life at, in 2020, it's a lot different than just like independently going through PDFs or any kind of written or online material and then trying to figure out what's the best way for me to plan my career, then having actual an actual program or maybe a service or even a person that coaches you forward with your career. And this was really interesting when we were talking about later on with the students and staff, and we'll come back to this later on. The second finding was that all of the stakeholders, and mind you, these were at this point, they were only staff members, no students involved at this point. They wanted better connections with work life. And in applied sciences level, that's taken for granted because it's already connected very well with work life. They have training programs in each level of education, and each it doesn't depend on your major. If you have training opportunities in companies or in public sector or something like that, you have to do that. But when you're doing your master's degree, is for example in humanities, sometimes the training opportunities and kind of these junior positions, they're really, really hard to find. Because, for example, I studied anthropology, and the only career path that they could advise me to go was to work in a museum, because the teachers they were educators and they were scholars. They were doing research. They didn't have any idea where to work as an anthropologist besides in the university. So they were basically doing the same kind of mantra to each level, each year to students, and the students that are kind of missing good opportunities to use their skills. And for example, when I studied anthropology in 2004, they said that, okay, your probable career path will be in the museum sector as a researcher or being unemployed. I've been all of those three in my life. So service design didn't exist in 2004, but luckily nowadays anthropologists are pretty prominent in this area. But then the final findings, which we already knew and everyone agreed with some varieties, the current technological solutions are not open, and it's almost not possible to make local exceptions. And this means, for example, if a student from upper secondary school, let's say they are 18-year-olds, at the moment, it is possible for them to take individual university courses if they want to. Sometimes they maybe it's in the open university or summer university, and you pay a couple of tens of euros for it or something like that. And sometimes it's free, but it's really, really hard to have the points from those courses collected in your student report, because the systems, they don't talk it with each other. There are no open APIs or anything like that. So everything is manual, and everything is based on, mind you, printed documents. And we were talking about Finland, the kind of like, we are very proud of our technological advancement and everything like that. But that was kind of like super big frustration between the people who were working in upper secondary and academic levels. So I will come later to that as well. But here are some national level strategic goals that I mapped out in the first phase. And this is something that I needed to keep in mind in every single phase of the project, that because we can't design anything that is against these strategic visions, because that means we won't get funded by the government for it. And this project, when we're trying to create an MVP, and creating a project plan for how much does it cost and how much do they need to apply for money for it. So we needed to connect the entire idea from the beginning to the big strategic visions as well. Then let's go to the phase 2, user insights. The actual research, it began with having kind of this mini crash course to digital service design and gaming and project planning and stuff like that. There were 15 students in my group, and they all applied for this course specifically. There were, well, 15 people applied. We were expecting something around 15 to 20, so we got everyone in. And they had backgrounds from business to philosophy to IT development. There were a couple of engineers as well, and then there were teachers, and I think there was one person working in the cultural section or something like that. But yeah, a really diverse group of people. And the students, after they finished with the kind of crash courses to digital service design, we planned together the interviews that they would do later on with the staff members and the students. And we used snowballing methods to recruit from their own peer networks, and kind of sometimes we advertise the interviews in emailing lists at the university or upper secondary schools or something like that. And it was pretty hard actually to find people for this interview, because in the beginning we didn't have any kind of incentives, and we didn't have kind of gift cards or anything like that. So after a couple of weeks of recruitment process, I decided that, okay, I'm paying this from my own pocket, so I need to have some kind of incentive for the students to give an hour or 2 hours of their time. So I bought kind of these gift vouchers to local food services, these kind of food delivery services. After that, it started to get better. It was only for €5, but it's still something. So it was kind of a motivator for the people to but in the middle of learning, it feels awful. So, and then we interviewed about these e-learning platforms that we were that they were using at the moment. And this is also talking to students that were already admitted to university or any kind of secondary school prior to COVID. And loads of students were reflecting their experiences prior COVID and after COVID. And they felt that the situation now, it's terrible. Some students were flourishing and feeling that this is something that they didn't feel that remote studying is a hindrance or an obstacle at all. But some students were really feeling that they were left out of the community. They had really big self-esteem problems and in general feeling really bad. Then we talked about networking in the work life and these alumni collaborations that were sometimes mentioned, international corporations, since many students go abroad to learn as well, and how do they feel that their experience is supported with the student services, and then the well-being and resilience and your kind of personal ways of coping as a student. We had a bonus content that I created a kind of short list of all the visionary ideas of having a virtual reality and entering a virtual reality as an avatar and all that. So I made statements, and then we asked the students, the interviewees, to rate those statements from 1 to 10, and 10 would be that, yes, I really want this, I wish this should already existed, and 0 was, please do not create anything like that. So everything related to virtual reality got really, really low points. I was expecting that as well. By the end of this phase 2, we completed in a smallish online survey as well, which had 402 responses, where we tried to map out also what is the scale of the findings from the interviews. And it was pretty much supporting that, but there were really big biases regarding which of the faculties or which of the majors responded to that. For example, we got maybe 6 responses. Loads of a different kind of project management aspects that I needed to take into account. For example, when we were planning interview contents together, and that was from there on, the rest of the project was entirely remote. The crash course to the digital service design, that was face-to-face workshopping, and I was teaching actually face-to-face with masks on, mind you. And it was a really, really good way of creating a sense of group, because after that I divided them into mini groups, and kind of because just getting to know two people online and remotely is really, really hard, and students were kind of timid to talk to each other, so that was a really important part of being able to be face to face. And also when I divided them into smaller working groups, so they were in maybe groups of 4 or 5, and they did their interviews independently, and I was the only one seeing the results from each group, and they kept repeating despite the fact that they were interviewing type of work is being done, and students, they didn't know, they were just following the question list. So that was really hard for me. As mentioned, they had smaller groups, so I wanted to be sure that they were doing the interviews correctly. But based on the way that they presented the results, and they also did written transcriptions of their interviews. One of the people was always writing notes, and really literate notes as well. So we tried to overcome the recording permit that way. Also, we couldn't share notes via.
Anna, so am I right to understand that you were not able to make a recording, like audio or video, but you could take records, right?
Yes, notes. And also these notes, we only had permission to send them to each other via email, and not Google Drive or anything like that because of the university restrictions. We needed to also make ethical approval and have signed research permits from the interviewees that were sent to the university board as well. So there were a lot of bureaucracy handling handling the data as well. But the most problem, maybe, well, not problem, but where I spent most of my time, was keeping the students active and engaged with the project. And I tried to do that by daily or bi-daily notes and messages in Slack, and try to keep them just like, hi, how are you going? How's everything going? How's the interviews going? Do you need help in anywhere? Have you found something interesting? And if they could, I was sharing links also to interesting material regarding student services, and try to keep them kind of like engaged with the theme as well, because I knew that they were already handling with the remoteness and everything, and also having some technical problems. For example, one of the participants didn't have camera at all, and her internet connection was so poor that she sometimes joined by phone calling to the meetings as well. And then there were mental health problems among the groups as well. Some of the people were really struggling, already struggling before COVID, but so I needed to take care of that as well. For example, I gave permission to skip meetings or skip workshops if they send a message to me that I'm feeling really unwell and I'm struggling with my mental health at the moment. So try to keep them there, because they were already doing amazing job. So my was trying to keep them stay project as well. Phase 3, this is where we go to the main findings. And after the phase 2, these are the 3 main findings that we got from the research phase. And the first was, the biggest one was competence recognition and the career planning that I already mentioned in the early on. Related to that, and also a little bit separated to that, is students' well-being, and that needs improvement in all levels of education. And then the third one, which we already found in the original vision and in the original because of the load and everything like that. So it's too vast and too complex. But the competence recognition, what do I actually learn and what do I know besides the studies that I'm taking? You can accumulate skills from hobbies, from extracurricular activities, and all these kind of different aspects of life besides work and learn education as well. So there were already some great examples and initiatives, projects from each stakeholder institutions, whether they were already trying to scale them up or they were trying kind of piloting different kind of opportunities. But the solutions that we wanted to focus on was on career planning and skill recognition. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you in detail what is the MVP that we created because they are trying to find a patent for that. But hopefully you will find out in a year or two. But I will try to introduce you to the product co-creation and how we kind of the roadmap to the MVP. So we used Miro, which is probably very, very familiar to many of you. Great platform for co-working. And we had 2 workshops. The first one was focusing on the co-ideation of different features that we could do in this career planning and skill recognition, maybe you could say skill recognition in English. And each group, we divided the participants in smaller groups, and each group had a kind of student persona that they reflected on. And some of the people heard about the student persona tool maybe 15 minutes before they started using it, but it went okay. I was really surprised. So for example, we had personas like 90-year-old trying to figure out which school they should go, and then to a 30-year-old already been in work life for some time, and then maybe going back to school, for example. So from these workshops with my colleague Sami, we started to categorize the findings in different kind of groups that could actually make product features and kind of map out the different kind of areas. This is how we started to further on categorize the ideas into features. We collected all the ideas that were talking about something about onboarding and the personalization of the product when you actually first time download it and start using it, and how does it feel, and what kind of things should happen. Then there's your personal profile. You start creating that and trying to figure out which kind of details do you need there in order to, for example, start career planning. So what kind of details do you need? And then all the features mentioned related to that. And then there was a few mentions of that related to settings and general settings of the product as well. But the hardest part at this point, when you're talking about a group of people remotely that have no idea how to stick to MVP, because some of the people were super excited about the original vision that in 2030, this is a product that is being internationally used, and this is the go-to way of offering student services in all of the educational levels in Finland, and all of that. So it's easier to keep it in an abstract visionary level than talking about features, because in each workshop, there was always some person who was talking about, and here we need a button that does this and this and this. So we always came to that, okay, let's talk about the button. So for a button, we need these type of features and these type of functionalities. So what kind of button are you actually talking about? So we were teaching the client and teaching the users at the same time as they were teaching us what do they actually need for the service to do, and in which kind of integrations should it be connected, and all those areas. So this was really interesting because this always comes up when designing digital services, how to kill your darlings, because sometimes there are a group of people or somebody who is enamored, they're in love with some idea that we need to have this, and then there are other people who are like, no we don't, no we don't. A minimal viable product doesn't require anything but the basic functionalities. I always try to use WhatsApp as an example. The university head of the applied university and Gradia and everything like that. So these were kind of like big influential people who are working in the educational industry in Finland. So this was kind of like the final slide that we presented, because at this project, we were trying to carve out the diamond from the coal, if you will, trying to figure out which kind of ideas are actually worth creating as a service. So the project goal wasn't designing any kind of interface. So we used this kind of mood board as an example of what it could be, and kind of inspiring at the end of the presentation that compared to the student services at the moment, these are miles away, millions of miles away, when talking about visually or user-friendly aspects or in user experience. So this is how we left it there. What did I learn? Users as designers and the remote problem, and I had some cultural context problems as well, our findings, and the magic of improvising. If you aren't familiar with anthropology, there's a method called ethnography, which is a qualitative pool of methods. It's like service design. It's like an umbrella term of different methodologies. And autoethnography was heavily used in this context because students that were working with me, they were constantly reflecting their own experiences. Is this true? Is this something that it's personal to me? Is this something that it's relevant to many people? Is this something that we could actually solve as a product? So there were loads of these autoethnographic questions and reflections going on in the first phase, which was kind of like a crash course of becoming an anthropologist. It was really a lot of fun. The remote angle and the student experience. This is something that I have done remote work for 12 years now, and I've done my entire PhD remotely, online, in Facebook, in YouTube, in World of Warcraft, in all of these environments. But this particular project taught me that we are losing tangible, this bodily experience of design when doing remote collaboration. For example, when we're talking about digital student services, we're talking about devices as well. So the students were, for example, dividing, I don't use anything school related with my mobile phone. I dedicate my computer only to schoolwork, and I don't use social media on my computer. So we are talking about devices as well. So that was really hard to grasp remotely as well. There's a Designing with the Body book published in 2018 that I highly recommend. There's a new approach called Soma design that kind of reincorporates body and movement into design. And this is something that I'm currently deeply passionate about, understanding the physical body and digital design, and how do we intertwine those together as well. Third finding, cultural context. And in this case, cultural context, we're talking about Finnish education, and we're talking about the different stakeholders that were involved in this project, and even individual departments between the academic institutions. Development projects in this sector, public sector, they are very, very slow and take time. So a lot of people told me that they had hard time adjusting in this kind of fast-paced, iterative working style. A 7-month-long project for me isn't that fast. Actually, it's quite long, and it's a kind of time-consuming. But for example, if we would have done that independently as consultants without the student participation, it would have been maybe around 8 weeks or something like that, roughly around 8 weeks. And I presume we would have come to the same conclusions. But then again, these people mentioned that, okay, we have a similar project going on, but we get findings from that year or year and a half from now. So this kind of overlapping expectations and policy differences were really, really hard to manage in this kind of multiple stakeholder project. What it caused was 3 times more micromanagement of project communication. I was always asking myself this question: will they understand if they didn't attend last session? When I was sending emails or calendar invitations or sharing any kind of project material in Slack or in Teams or anything like that, I was always asking myself when I was preparing even the smallest email, will they understand if they didn't attend last session or last meeting? So I was trying to always highlight the most important point of the communication. I used headlines, for example, what is expected from me when attending, for example, a workshop. So I got really good feedback from that, that I was kind of using the user perspective in my project communication as well. And lastly, improvised method switching. Miro crashed and we didn't have the material anywhere else besides Miro. All of the notes, all of the previous workshop materials, everything. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible until 2 minutes before the workshop, Miro started to work again. So after that, we tested the service and everything like that. I could actually now right there take screenshots, even if it's on a cloud service or something like that. Download it locally, take screenshots, do everything to make sure that if technology fails, and it will fail, you have something to work on. So, as mentioned, service design is, in my opinion, it's about facilitating knowledge between people. And this project crystallized the value of users as co-designers. I don't know if I could have done it as beautifully as I did with the students. And the students were really part of creating the service that they felt that is acutely needed. And that was the career planning service that hopefully will be built soon. Thank you for listening. Any questions, any comments?
Hi, Anna, thank you very much. Thank you for beautiful presentation, sharing all the learnings and all the pitfalls. We have a couple of questions. I'll just go from bottom to top. What was the book that you mentioned about designing, considering the body and digital media?
Yes, it is just a minute. Here. Designing with the body.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. Thank you.
It's a really good book.
Thank you. I'll take a note myself as well. Then there is another question from Max. You told us that you had like 10 topics to discuss with the students and you made 23 interviews. Did you touch every topic in every interview and how long the interviews were?
Yeah. Yes, we did. We around 90% of the topics. For example, yeah, in some occasions, for example, if the interviewee didn't have any opinion about career planning, then of course we didn't pursue that. But we went through the interview. The question list was exactly the same for every interview. The interviews lasted roughly from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the people who were interviewing and depending how talkative the interviewee was. So sometimes, for example, the 45 minutes, that was from a person that basically was always responding like, I don't know, maybe something like this. I don't know. I
see.
So, I heard that it was a long 45 minutes.
Thank you. You mentioned that from the strategy session, from the first session, you already saw this opportunity about career planning. How come? So it was obvious for the stakeholders even before you were doing an interview, right?
Yes, that was mentioned by some few of the people who were part of the steering group. Those were people who were managers of educational development, or they were people who already were involved in the topic themselves. My hunch before this project was from what I've heard, especially from the university level. My hunch was that this might be a big theme, but I had no idea how big.
I see. Thank you. Well, and you mentioned that one of your roles was to inspire the stakeholders. What did you tell them?
When this, as mentioned, these were people who were really, really busy, and there were people who were only heard from the initial vision that, okay, we are creating a virtual reality. That sucks. It's a bad idea. And sometimes they didn't realize that, okay, this virtual reality was buried long ago. So I tried to engage everyone during the meetings. I tried to ask questions from them, but I also tried to give them concrete examples, case examples, for example, how something is done, some kind of service that they were using. For example, how do we design a smart watch interface? Or how do we design an experience when we go to a pharmacy in real world and not digitally, and trying to give them kind of ideas of the project process that we were tackling. And also the idea was inspiring and engaging the right people. Not everyone is willing to be inspired or willing to engage everything. As I mentioned, they were already dealing with a lot of projects at the same time as well, but engaging the right people who became advocates of this project in their own faculties or institutions. That was really, really important. Kind of for example, as simple as this, telling that you're appreciated and you're doing a good job. It sounds simple, but when you give somebody that kind of feedback, thank you for this, I really appreciate your work that you've given to, for example, material or something like that. I hope this project helps you in the future in your personal work or something like that. So it was kind of giving really good feedback.
Super, thank you. Yeah, actually, it works.
Yeah.
How did you measure the success of your proposal, your MVP?
We had 3 phases. The first one was just between us and the client, which was the professor and the teacher. We were talking about the results and whether they felt that it was broad enough, detailed enough, and whether it was answering to the initial project proposal. Then we presented it to the steering group, and they had an opportunity to comment on it as well. And then we had a public result presentation. It was open for anybody to attend, and it was broadcasted from the university's Zoom. And there were roughly around almost maybe 80, 90 people listening, mostly working in the university or in the applied sciences, but lots of people in Gradia institution as well. So the feedback from the steering group was when there was particularly one person who was head of IT, I'm not going to tell where, but that person was really against the whole idea of this project. They felt that, why is this being done? This is too complicated, and I feel this is not contributing to any real life problem. He became Yes, I know the book. Yes, I know the book. I haven't read it myself. I've seen the YouTube video, but I haven't read it. It's on my reading list. But it might be a really, really good way of applying design methods to yeah, I totally hear what are you coming after. I haven't read it yet, but I know the book.
Thank you. Thank you, Maxim. Anna, it was a great pleasure to host you. Thank you very much for sharing. This is,
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure we have more questions, but I'm afraid our translator may lost his voice already. Not only you, again, once again, I appreciate your participation. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody who decided to attend. Just a quick reminder, we are part of Service Design Network, a great organization of service designers. You are welcome to join, you are welcome to follow, you are welcome to practice service design, most of all. Anna, thank you for the wonderful presentation, and everybody, see you soon in our next lecture. And Anna, you are welcome to join and to listen to other speakers as well, of course.
Yes, thank you. I will.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.